Hey designers, this is Kristen from Cut File Classroom, where I teach you how to design and sell SVG cut files for Cricut, Silhouette, and other cutting machines. In this video, I'll show you how to draw a simple Cactus SVG file. With the cowboy western trend going strong, cacti can be a fun addition to your designs in this theme. If you want to follow along, I'll put a link below where you can download the free Illustrator practice file, which includes this finished design, the color palette, and a few design variations. First, I'll move this design over to the side so I have room on my artboard. Then I'll press the P key on my keyboard to bring up the pen tool. You can also find the pen tool over here in the tool panel. With the pen tool selected, I'm going to draw a vertical line that is almost straight and has just a slight bend to it. This is going to be the spine for our cactus. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the fill color, and I'm going to give it a green stroke color. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the stroke weight. So I can come over here to the stroke panel, and I'm going to increase the stroke weight to about 60 points. If you don't have the stroke panel open, you can come up to Windows and find it here in the Windows menu. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to round off these end caps. So I'm going to click this center icon here that says round cap in the stroke panel, and that's going to give me nice rounded caps. So now we can kind of start to see the body of our cactus taking shape. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the width tool, which is located here in the toolbar. When I have the width tool selected, I can hover my mouse over any path and you see this little white dot appears. I'm going to put the white dot at one of the ends of my path, and I'm going to click and just drag away from the center of that path. And as I drag, we can see this blue guideline that shows how I'm going to widen this path stroke. So I'm going to make it a little wider at the top than it is at the bottom, and I think that kind of gives it a little bit of character. So now I'm going to press the P key on my keyboard and come back to the pen tool, and I'm going to continue drawing the arms of my cactus. But before I do that, I'm going to head over to the appearance panel, and I'm going to click this little hamburger icon at the top right. And I'm just going to make sure New Art has Basic Appearance is not checked. So if this is checked for you, you want to make sure it is not checked. So that's going to make sure that when I draw my next path, it's going to have the same appearance as this line. So I'm going to click and just kind of make a curved path for the arm of this cactus. And as you can see, it has the green stroke. It has the same adjustments with the width tool where one end is wider than the other. If I notice that the beginning of the path is wider than the end, if I want to flip that, I can use the pen tool to click on the starting end of that path, and it'll go ahead and flip the path direction. Another way you could do that is by coming up to Object, Path, Reverse Path Direction, and it'll go ahead and flip the path direction. I think I like the end of the arm to be a little bit wider, so I'm going to keep it that way. And then I'm just going to tweak the shape of this arm the way that I like it, and I'm actually going to decrease the thickness here a little bit. I'm going to bring it back down to 60. Notice that when we use the width tool here, now it's telling me that the weight of this stroke is like 88 point something. And that's Illustrator's kind of taking an average of how much we increased the width of this path. So again, I've drawn my arm. So now I'm going to come back to the pen tool, press P on my keyboard, and I'm going to draw another arm. And because I have the New Art Maintains Basic Appearance unchecked, it's going to keep the same appearance from the rest of our cactus. So I want the other end to be thicker. So I'm going to click on the starting point of my path, and that reversed the thickness to the ends where I like it. And I can just kind of play around with these arms and get them the way that I like them. I can hold Alt as I click and drag, and I can add another arm, and I could, I could make this longer. You can really create a ton of variations of cacti, and you can just kind of play around. You can change how much it bends or curves and all sorts of things like that. So I'm just going to come back to what we originally had, which is just a two-armed cactus, kind of a medium height. And I'm gonna make this a little bit taller here, and I think I'm happy with that. So once you're happy with the overall shape of your cactus, we can go ahead and convert these paths into vector shapes. But before we do that, I'm going to select everything and press Alt as I click and drag and make a copy of this version over to the side. And then I can always come back to this and I can create other cactus variations very quickly and easily without starting from scratch. So coming back over, I'll select everything and I'm going to choose Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and that's going to create vector paths from those strokes. And then I'm going to come in the Pathfinder panel and click Unite, and that's going to combine them into a single shape instead of multiple overlapping shapes. And then I'm going to right click and choose Simplify, and I'm just going to clean up some of those extra nodes that are on this design because that makes it easier and smoother for cutting machines to read. When that Simplify menu comes up, I'm going to click the little settings cog so I have more options here. And for Simplify, I find that Simplify Curve is somewhere in the 90s and Corner Point Angle Threshold somewhere in the 140s typically works for me and creates a good balance between cleaning up the points without destroying the shape too much. I use the preview button to see how my changes look, and then I click OK, and we can see we have a cleaned up cactus shape. Now you could absolutely use this as is. It would be very easy to cut and work with, especially if you're cutting it smaller, if you are cutting it from paper, using it for a cake topper or scrapbook layout or something like that. But if you did want to add cactus needles to it, let's go ahead and show how to do that. So I'm actually going to use the line tool, which is here in the tool panel. I'm just going to click and draw a straight vertical line. Now, right now this line has no fill and no stroke, so I'm going to give it a stroke color that is a slightly darker green than our cactus body. And I'm going to create a round cap and make it a little thicker again. Let's see, and you can use the width tool again, or you can choose this preset width profile here in the stroke panel, which I'm going to do here. And that gives me like a triangle, and that gives me kind of a pointy triangle teardrop shape. And I'm going to actually make that a little thicker. Let's see how 12 point looks. Yeah, I think that's better. So now that I've created this, I can go ahead and use the line tool to continue drawing other cactus needles around my design. So I'm just going to click and drag out in different directions, and that way I can place needles on my cactus. And I'm trying not to make them too long and trying to make them look somewhat scattered around my cactus. I don't want to have too many, and this type of design where we're including all of these needles would be much better suited for vinyl because you'd be able to use the transfer paper to easily place all of these needles. If you were cutting this from something like paper, obviously all of these tiny needle pieces would not be ideal. So I'll show you another option that we can do for paper in a second. So once you go ahead and get all of your needles placed, you can like tweak and rotate them and try to get them to look the way you want them to look. By the way, while you're creating your needle shape, you could choose to keep the end flat if you wanted to, and that gives you more of like a sharp triangular shape. You could, kind of play around with the shape to get it the way you want. I kind of liked the way the rounded end looked, so that's why I went with that. But that's something that's totally up to you. So like I said, I'm just gonna play around and get the cactus needles where I'd like them to be placed on this design. And I'll go ahead and pull this one in. And you just want to make sure that the tips of your cactus needles aren't too skinny. I went with like a wider base for them because if these, let me just make this real skinny for a minute. If this end point gets way too skinny, you're going to run into problems with paper or vinyl where it's going to crinkle on you. It's going to be hard to adhere to the surface that you're working with. It's just best practice for SVGs to make sure that you don't have any parts in your designs that are way too skinny or thin. So I've got my nice thick points, and I'm just kind of moving some of these out, and you'll see why in a minute, so that they can extend past the outer edge of the cactus. And once I get that looking the way that I'm happy with, now I can select the whole design, and I'm going to press Shift and click on just the cactus body to deselect it. So right now I only have the cactus needle selected, and I'm going to press Command or Control G to make them all into a group. So if I need to select them and work with them, it's much easier to do that than trying to select them one by one. So now at this point in my design, I'm going to make another copy over to the side, because if I ever do want to come back and tweak these and maybe make them have sharper angles or maybe make them longer, I can do that. And I'm going to come back over to my design and select all of the needles, just the needles, and I'm going to press Object, Path, Outline Stroke again, and that's going to convert all of those paths into actual vector shapes. And while I have these needles selected, I'm going to go ahead and make these into a compound path. So you can press Command or Control 8 on your keyboard, or you can come up to Object, Compound Path, Make, and now these will all show up on a single layer in Design Space. So they are easy to work with and will also keep their correct placement when you send them to your cutting mat. Now, earlier I mentioned that having all these individual needles would be really hard to deal with if you were cutting from paper. So I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to show you something that you could do to handle that. So as mentioned earlier, you could just use the basic cactus shape without any needles on there. But if you did want to have the spiky needle effect, what I would do is I would select everything and come in the Pathfinder panel and click Unite and just make it all into a single shape. And you can leave it dark green, you can make it light green, whatever color you prefer. But now you also have those spikes, and that's kind of why I was pulling some of those needles out beyond the edge of the cactus body to make sure that they would be visible and not just be a little tiny point. As you can see, I probably could have pulled some of these points out even a little further, but I think you get the point. So that's it for some quick and easy cactus designs. Now you're ready to go ahead and export these as SVGs and upload into your cutting software. If you'd like to learn more about designing SVG files for cutting machines, head over to Cut File Classroom and download my free Designer's Guide to Error-Free SVGs. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and feel free to drop any questions in the comments below. Let me know what you'd like to see next, and I'd be happy to make a video about it. See you next time.